This is Cato Weekly Video. How is the surge in Iraq progressing? Are the objectives and benchmarks set for the Iraqi government achievable? And to what extent has the surge reduced long-term violence in Iraq? Marc Lynch is professor of political science at George Washington University. He says the Bush administration has taken a particularly tone-deaf approach to Iraq, and he's troubled by the disconnect between rhetoric and the realities of the battleground. He spoke at a Cato Institute event entitled Assessing the Surge. It was held September 20th, 2007. This is a segment of a longer event available at our website, cato.org.
The story that I've been hearing about the Sunni areas of Iraq is one in which the new lines of conflict are pretty much between the tribes, which are now on our side, and al-Qaeda, which is on the other side. And American forces have been forming alliances, military and political, with the tribes in order to drive out al-Qaeda and have been achieving some level of political success. The general notion or the argument about this is that by bringing these former Sunni insurgents into the police, into self-organized village protection societies and the like, don't call them militias, call them something else, this will then lead to a process of bottom-up reconciliation as the Sunnis begin to feel secure and they understand that they have thrown their lot in with the United States. This is a very interesting story, and it bears very little relation to the Sunni Iraqi experience with which I'm familiar. And I'm going to be really honest about this. I don't pretend to know everything which is going on in the Sunni areas of Iraq. I don't think anybody does. There is a great fog of war. There is a great deal of mystification. There is a lot of disinformation coming out from all sides, and it's difficult to pierce through the fog of what's going on. So what do I focus on? I focus on what what Iraqi Sunni political leaders are saying to their own people in Arabic. That's what I care about. I want to know, how are they interpreting what's going on inside of Iraq? How are they interpreting their relationship with the United States? And how do they see the future of Iraq? The sources for this are fortunately fairly easy to get because of the internet and because of the kind of new media technologies that Ted pointed out that I follow so closely. When I read the statements on the Sunni Iraqi forums, when I read the press releases, when I watch their appearances on Al Jazeera, the story that I get is one which, again, looks a little bit different. The Sunni story, the narrative, which seems to be the dominant one among Sunni politics right now, is one in which the factions of the Sunni insurgency defeated the United States in the war. It was their military success which brought the United States to the table and led the United States to come to them for help against al-Qaeda. They believe that they have won the war and that it was their military prowess which brought the United States to the table. So they received the United States as when President Bush came to Anbar province and was received with the slaughter of 50 sheep, they receive it as tribute to their success. And they are willing to accept this American submission to their political agenda in the short term, as long as the real political agenda is not confused. These leaders are very clear, very open, and very public about their agenda, which is to drive the United States out of Iraq. They claim, they might be lying, but they at least claim that their insurgency against the United States proceeds apace, and that their cooperation with American forces, which they do not deny, is purely in self-defense in areas where they are threatened by al-Qaeda or by Shia militias, and limited to self-defense of Sunni areas, but goes no further than that. There is absolutely no sign of bottom-up political reconciliation in this discourse. Quite to the contrary. There is a rising incidence of anti-Shia hostility and a rising sense of the inevitability of war and conflict with the Shia. The Maliki government is universally described as sectarian and is increasingly described as Iranian. The distinctions drawn by the insurgency are between good Iraqis, whether they're Sunni or Shia, and Iranians. And for those of you who think that this might lead to the possibility of the formation of a united front between, say, the Jaish al-Mahdi and the insurgency factions, don't get your hopes or fears up. The Islamic Army of Iraq has explained that the Jaish al-Mahdi's problem with the United States is over America's attitude towards Iran. not towards the occupation itself. They seem to be describing Assad there as an Iranian, not as a true Iraqi. Public opinion polls you have to take with a grain of salt, but the most recent one, which I'm sure many of you saw, the ABC-BBC survey, found that 95% of Sunnis say that the presence of U.S. troops is making security worse. Only 1% of Sunnis, that's 1%, say they have any confidence in American forces. And only 1% of Sunnis say that they support the American presence in Iraq. Now, again, you want to take this with some degree of salt. It reminds me of the old joke about Hafiz al-Assad. You know, he wins 99.9% of the vote, and then his advisor comes to him and says, well, what do you want? And he says, I want the names of the 0.1%. There's no doubt a great deal of intimidation and social pressure going on, but that in itself should tell you something about the social and political environment in those areas. If there has been a tip over to support of the United States, it has reached neither the leadership of the major armed factions nor widespread public opinion. The idea of bottom-up reconciliation is fatally flawed. It just makes no sense, either empirically or theoretically. Even if you have Sunnis participating in the Iraqi police forces, they do so in unintegrated units with a clear knowledge that the leadership of these institutions of the state are dominated by Shia sectarian forces. This isn't a glass ceiling, it's a stainless steel ceiling, and everybody knows it. As long as the institutions of the state look as they do, there's no possibility for bottom-up reconciliation. What impresses me more than any notion of bottom-up reconciliation is the reality of these deep and growing sectarian animosities and the growing fragmentation of both the Shia and the Sunni communities. The political scientist Jim Fearon wrote, I think, a very important article in Foreign Affairs not too long ago, where he made the argument that there are certain factors which make it possible to resolve a sectarian civil war and certain factors which make a sectarian civil war likely to continue. And he argued that if you don't get from the latter conditions to the former conditions, then it doesn't matter whether you keep your forces there for 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years. All that's going to happen is that once you leave, the same dynamics will then kick into place. And by his standards, by his metric, we are very much in that situation right now. Now, the disconnect between what I'm saying about the Sunni areas, which is as good as I can do as a transmission of what the Sunnis are saying, telling themselves about the Sunni areas, and the Washington discussion of the Sunni areas worries me immensely. It worries me immensely because I worry that we are in danger of fooling ourselves once again and falling victim to our own propaganda. International relations scholars call this blowback, and I believe it's happening to us. Just yesterday, I had the unique experience of watching on Al Jazeera one of David's colleagues from the Weekly Standard debating an Iraqi tribal sheikh and lecturing this Iraqi tribal sheikh in English about what was really going on in the Iraqi Sunni communities. It boggled the mind.
Marc Lynch is professor of political science at George Washington University. This is Cato Weekly Video. The complete video of this event is available at our website, cato.org.